the disturbing illness that changed Ren forever. Most people discovered Ren through one performance. A chair in the middle of a room. A guitar. A haunting expression on his face. And a conversation that sounded less like music and more like a man fighting a war inside his own head. But what most people never realized is that the pain inside Ren's music was never an act. It was real. Before the millions of views. Before the reactions. Before the internet called him a genius. Ren was trapped inside a nightmare that slowly destroyed his body, his mind, and almost his future. And the worst part? Almost nobody believed him. For years, Ren was fighting something doctors couldn't fully explain. People around him thought it was anxiety. Some believed he was exaggerating. Others thought it was psychological. But behind closed doors, Ren's body was collapsing in ways he could barely understand himself. This is the dark story behind the artist the internet accidentally discovered. And how suffering transformed him into one of the most emotionally powerful musicians alive today. Long before the world knew the name Ren, he was just a creative kid growing up in Wales. Music became an escape early in his life. Not because he wanted fame. Not because he dreamed of becoming rich. But because music gave him something most people desperately search for their entire lives. Relief. There was always a deep emotional intensity inside him. Even as a young artist, his performances felt unusually raw. Not polished. Not artificial. Real. And that authenticity would later become the exact reason millions connected to him. But before all of that happened, something started going wrong. At first, the symptoms were confusing. Exhaustion. Pain. Mental fog. Physical weakness. The kind of symptoms people often dismiss because they don't look serious from the outside. But inside his body, things were getting worse. Much worse. And this is where the story becomes disturbing. Because one of the hardest things about chronic illness is not just the suffering itself. It's the isolation. When people cannot physically see your pain, they often assume it isn't real. That's exactly what began happening to Ren. Imagine waking up every day feeling like your body is betraying you, while the world expects you to act normal. Imagine trying to explain pain that doctors themselves struggle to define. Imagine feeling your future slowly disappearing while people around you question whether anything is actually wrong. That kind of experience changes a person psychologically. And for Ren, it became the foundation of his art. Over time, his health continued to decline. There were periods where he could barely function normally. His energy disappeared. His mental state suffered. And eventually, the situation became so serious that music itself started slipping away from him. For an artist, that's terrifying. Music wasn't just a hobby to Ren. It was identity, purpose, survival. And now the very thing keeping him emotionally alive was becoming harder and harder to hold on to. But the most painful part of this story is what happened during the search for answers. Because Ren spent years trapped in uncertainty. Different opinions. Different diagnoses. Different assumptions. No clear solution. And when someone spends years in physical suffering without certainty, it starts affecting the mind in dangerous ways. You begin doubting yourself. You begin questioning reality. You begin wondering if life will ever feel normal again. This internal collapse would later become visible in his music. Especially in performances like Hi Ren. Because songs like that do not sound like imagination. They sound like lived experience. And that's why people reacted so emotionally when they first discovered him. You could hear the exhaustion, the fear, the chaos, the frustration. Not performed emotion. Real emotion. At one point, Ren's condition became so severe that he traveled for treatment. That alone reveals how desperate the situation had become. People do not leave everything behind searching for medical help unless the suffering reaches an unbearable level. And during this period, isolation became part of daily life. Imagine being young, watching other people move forward with careers, relationships, dreams, while you are simply trying to survive each day. That psychological damage builds slowly, and eventually, it changes how you see the world. This is one reason Ren storytelling feels different from mainstream music. Most artists write about pain. Ren sounds like someone who lived inside it. There's a difference. You can hear it. You can feel it. And audiences immediately recognize that authenticity. Especially online. Because modern audiences are exhausted by artificial personalities, perfect influencers, fake emotions, manufactured music. Then suddenly they discovered Ren. An artist sitting alone with a guitar speaking openly about fear, darkness, self-hatred, suffering, and mental collapse. People were stunned. Not because the performance was flashy, but because it felt honest. Painfully honest. And honesty is powerful, especially in a world full of performance. But behind that honesty was years of suffering most viewers knew nothing about. Years of feeling trapped inside his own body. Years of uncertainty. Years of emotional warfare. And perhaps the darkest part. Years of feeling misunderstood. That feeling destroys many people. When human beings suffer physically while also feeling emotionally unseen, it creates a dangerous psychological state. Loneliness becomes heavier. Thoughts become darker. Hope becomes fragile. And for some people, that pressure eventually breaks them. But somehow, Ren transformed it into art. That transformation is one of the most fascinating parts of his story. Because many people experience suffering. But very few people can translate suffering into something millions emotionally connect with. That ability is rare. And it explains why Ren's rise online felt so different from traditional fame. Most viral artists explode because of trends. Ren exploded because of emotional impact. People didn't just watch his performances. They experienced them. Reaction channels cried. Listeners paused videos in silence. Comment sections turned into therapy sessions. Complete strangers began sharing personal trauma underneath his music videos. That almost never happens on that scale unless the art touches something deeply human. And Ren's music did exactly that. Not because it was perfect. Because it was vulnerable. There's a line between entertainment and emotional truth. Ren crossed that line. And once audiences felt it, they couldn't ignore him anymore. But the reality behind that emotional connection is tragic. Because the very thing making his art powerful was the same suffering nearly destroying him privately. That contradiction exists throughout his entire journey. Pain became both his greatest enemy and the fuel behind his artistry. You can hear it in the tension of his voice. You can hear it in the pauses between words. You can hear it in the intensity of his storytelling. There's emotional weight behind it. Not manufactured sadness. Lived sadness. And viewers subconsciously recognize the difference. Especially during High Ren. That performance changed everything. Not because of marketing. Not because a record label pushed it. Because people genuinely felt disturbed watching it. The performance felt less like a song and more like witnessing someone confronting their inner demons in real time. That's rare. Very rare. Most artists create distance between themselves and their audience. Ren removed the distance completely. And that vulnerability shocked people. Because modern entertainment usually hides weakness. Ren exposed it. Directly. Openly. Fearlessly. But what makes his story even more intense is understanding the mental toll chronic illness can create over years. People often underestimate how psychological physical suffering becomes. When pain continues long enough, it starts affecting identity itself. You stop recognizing the version of yourself you used to be. You mourn the life you expected to have. You fear the future constantly. And eventually, your inner dialogue changes. This psychological conflict became central to Ren's artistry. The conversations inside his songs feel authentic because they likely came from years of internal struggle. Fear versus hope. Darkness versus survival. Despair versus creativity. And millions of people connected with that conflict because they recognized pieces of themselves inside it. That is why Ren's audience feels unusually loyal. They don't just admire him. Many feel understood by him. That emotional relationship between artist and audience is extremely powerful. Especially when people feel emotionally isolated in their own lives. And ironically, the isolation Ren experienced became the exact thing helping others feel less alone. That transformation is incredible when you think about it. A man suffering privately ends up helping strangers publicly through honesty. But the story still carries sadness underneath it. Because none of this success came without cost. Behind the performances was exhaustion. Behind the creativity was suffering. Behind the emotional depth was genuine pain. And perhaps that's why his work feels unforgettable. Because the audience senses there is something real underneath every word. Not branding. Not strategy. Truth. And truth is difficult to fake consistently. Especially emotionally. Another reason Ren's story became so fascinating online is because people today are obsessed with authenticity. Audiences are becoming increasingly skilled at detecting fake emotion. And when someone truly authentic appears, people react strongly. That's exactly what happened here. Viewers immediately realized Ren was not pretending to be vulnerable. He actually was vulnerable. That distinction changed everything. It transformed him from another musician into an experience people wanted to talk about. Reaction videos exploded. Discussions spread across social media. Fans began analyzing lyrics deeply. And suddenly, an artist who spent years struggling in darkness became one of the most emotionally discussed musicians online. But fame after suffering creates another complicated psychological reality. Because healing does not instantly happen once recognition arrives. Success cannot erase trauma overnight. The body remembers suffering. The mind remembers fear. And emotional scars remain long after public success begins. That's important to understand when discussing Ren. Because many viewers romanticize pain after seeing beautiful art emerge from it. But living through that pain is not romantic. It's terrifying. Confusing. Exhausting. And often lonely. The music may sound beautiful now. But the experiences creating it likely felt unbearable at times. And that context changes how you hear his work. Suddenly the performances feel heavier. The lyrics feel more personal. The emotional intensity makes more sense. You realize this is not just performance. It's survival translated into music. And maybe that's why audiences remain fascinated by him. Because in an era dominated by filters, algorithms, and artificial personalities, Ren feels human. Messy. Vulnerable. Unfiltered. And people crave that now more than ever. Especially younger audiences struggling mentally themselves. Many listeners discovered pieces of their own anxiety, fear, depression, loneliness, or emotional conflict inside his songs. That emotional reflection created connection. And connection created loyalty. But the darkest truth behind Ren's story may be this. The same sensitivity making him an extraordinary artist likely also intensified his suffering. Highly emotionally aware people often experience pain differently. They absorb experiences deeply. They internalize emotions intensely. And when that combines with physical illness, the result can become psychologically overwhelming. Yet somehow, instead of collapsing completely, Ren created art from it. Not shallow art. Not commercial art. Human art. And that distinction matters. Because people remember art that makes them feel understood. That's why millions continue discovering his work even now. Not because he fits industry formulas, but because he breaks them. There's also something symbolic about his rise happening online rather than through traditional industry systems. For years, the entertainment industry often rewarded perfection over authenticity. Image over truth. Polish over vulnerability. But internet audiences changed that. People started searching for something real. And when Ren appeared, many felt like they had finally found it. An artist openly discussing darkness without hiding behind celebrity masks. That honesty became magnetic. And perhaps unintentionally, Ren created something bigger than music. He created emotional permission. Permission for people to discuss suffering openly. Permission for vulnerability. Permission for emotional honesty. That impact goes far beyond entertainment. And it explains why audiences speak about him differently from normal musicians. Many fans don't simply say they enjoy his songs. They say his music helped them. That is a completely different type of relationship between creator and audience. And it rarely happens accidentally. It usually happens when art comes from genuine experience. Looking back at his journey now, the contrast feels almost unbelievable. A young artist trapped inside years of illness and uncertainty eventually becomes one of the internet's most emotionally respected performers. But none of it happened quickly. And none of it came easily. There were years of confusion before recognition. Years of pain before applause. Years of isolation before connection. And perhaps that long struggle is exactly why his art feels so emotionally layered today. Because suffering changes perspective permanently. People who survive darkness often see the world differently afterward. Their priorities change. Their emotions deepen. Their understanding of human pain expands. And that emotional depth becomes visible in their work. That is exactly what happened with Ren. Every performance carries weight behind it. History behind it. Experience behind it. Which is why even simple moments inside his music feel emotionally intense. There's something underneath the surface. Something viewers can sense even if they cannot explain it. And that emotional tension keeps audiences watching. It keeps them replaying performances. It keeps them emotionally invested. Because humans naturally respond to truth. Even painful truth. Especially painful truth. And Ren built his artistry around confronting painful truths directly. Mental struggle. Fear. Inner conflict. Illness. Loneliness. Self-doubt. These are uncomfortable subjects most people avoid publicly. Ren walked directly into them. And strangely, that honesty became his greatest strength.